Got sound. Good morning, you guys. I'm going to jump right into it this morning since it's kind of late. Welcome to my channel. My name is Natasha. I just want to process with you guys what I studied this morning with the Lord. This morning I had to read John chapter 15. Thank you so much for commenting in the chat and letting me know where you're watching from, and if you have any comments that you want to make about what I'm talking about. I'm just going to go through this and then I'll turn my attention toward the chat and we could have a conversation about it. And so John chapter 15 says, I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away. And every branch that bears fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. You are already clean because of the word which I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As the branch cannot bear fruit of itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. He who abides in me and I in him bears much fruit. For without me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is cast out as a branch and is withered, and they gather them and throw them into the fire, and they are burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, you will ask what you desire, and it shall be done for you. By this my Father is glorified, that you bear much fruit, so you will be my disciples. Verse 9. As the Father loved me, I also have loved you. Abide in my love. If you keep my commandments, you will abide in my love, just as I have kept my Father's commandments and abided in his love. These things I have spoken to you, that my joy may remain in you, and that your joy may be full. This is my commandment, that you love one another as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for his friends. You are my friends, if you do whatever I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not know what his master is doing, but I have called you friends. For all things that I heard from my Father, I have made known to you. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you, that you should go and bear fruit, and that your fruit should remain, that whatever you ask the Father in my name, he may give you. These things I command you, that you love one another. If the world hates you, you know that it hated me before it hated you. If you were of the world would love its own. Yet because you are not of the world, but I chose you out of the world, therefore the world hates you. Remember the word that I said to you. A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. If they kept my word, they will keep yours also. But all these things they do to you for my name's sake, because they do not know him who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would have no sin. But now they have no excuse for their sin. He who hates me hates my Father also. If I had not done among them the works which no one else did, they would have no sin. But now they have seen and also hated both me and my Father. But this happened that the word might be fulfilled, which is written in their law, they hated me without cause. But when the Helper comes, whom I shall send to you from the Father, the Spirit of truth, who proceeds from the Father, he will testify of me. And you will also bear witness, because you have been with me from the beginning. You guys, this is what Jesus said. This is what Jesus said. These are his words. And these are the words that are recorded that he said by many witnesses. Okay? And the religious leaders of his time fully appreciated what he was saying. And that is what drove them to crucify him. They were incensed that he created this kind of, he described this kind of relationship between him and the Father. And to clarify, who is the Father? Okay, in their culture, the Father that they're talking about is God, who they worship. Okay, who got, they had a very specific way of relating to God according to the law that their ancestors received from Moses when he took them. God used him to deliver them out of slavery in Egypt. Moses led them out of Egypt, and they became a nation together. And it happened supernaturally. If you're not familiar with the details of that, go ahead and look at it. In the book of Exodus, the book of Deuteronomy, the book of Numbers, the book of Leviticus, and you'll have all the details of how they came to be a people and how God miraculously delivered them from the slavery that they were in Egypt, and how through Moses God revealed himself to these people and let them know, have a sense of who he was through Moses, and implemented a system. He implemented a structure and a law for how they were going to live, and for how they were going to relate to him, and how they were going to worship him. Okay. And he also gave them insight into, the relationship between God and man, and the condition that our relationship with God was in. It's a relationship where God created us, and the relationship was broken through sin, through the initial sin of Adam and Eve. And I feel like through the structure that he laid out for them, he painted a picture that there's a problem here in our relationship. There's an ongoing problem of sin in our relationship. And this is my character. I'm righteous. I'm holy. I'm true. I don't want anything to do with sin. But I do want relationship with you. And I want close relationship with you. In fact, I'm going to define that relationship as a father relationship to their children. This is the kind of intimate relationship I want with you. But do know that I am, in fact, the all-powerful God. I am the beginning and I am the end. I just am. I've always been. Okay, so he kind of described himself this way to these people. So that's who they understood him to be. Okay, and he, broke. I spent a lot of time in the live talking about how, we're in this carnal existence, but do know that it came out of a spiritual reality that's greater than this thing that we can, you know, experience through our senses, what we can see, what we can hear, what we can touch, what we can taste. There's something greater, that there's a spiritual reality, you know, that it takes God to help us to see into and to experience. But with our natural senses, we go about being completely unaware of it. But, if you really stop and think about it, there's this sense of knowing that we have, that it's there. And people have tried so hard to define it. Outside of God, even they've tried so hard to define it and to understand it. And it's in all our creative outlets. You see, there's this multiverse idea. There's this idea of eternal beings. There's this idea that out there's something all powerful. And yes, it's presented, as fiction, but it's also man trying to reach out and understand God. And if you study history and you go all the way back to as far back as we can, to the history that we've been able to uncover through archaeology and things like that, you will see that even before there was anybody to even get up on a pulpit and make, do a presentation about God, there's just been this assumption that there has to be somebody greater than me out there. And I'm going to try to figure out how to define it, and God has revealed why that is. In I think one of the Corinthians, it talks about how God himself placed that sense of knowing that he is in us. And it even says that we can even look at nature. Even nature is professing the reality of God. And a lot of times we made the mistake to worship that nature. Okay? So they have this revelation of God that God gave them. God actually basically revealed himself. We people have made all these, we've had all these fantasies before this revelation. There have been all these fantasies about what God must be like. There have been all these fantasies about what he thinks of us and how he fits in our lives. But then in comes Moses and these people. God himself says, okay, I'm going to clarify to you, because it was not always so that we didn't know who God was, because Adam and Eve knew God. But progressively through the ages, as people turned to sin and shut their ears away from God, I feel like more myth and legend rose up, so that what we knew about God and how we related to God became more fantasy than the truth that we had known in the beginning. And so God has to step back in with Moses and give them a picture of who he really is and what this situation really is. Okay? And so this God, this Father that Jesus is always referring to, in his day, when he said that to these religious leaders, they would understand that to mean that he was talking about the Almighty God, the creator of the universe, the one that Moses told us about and revealed to us. And we had so many supernatural experiences with him. He entered into our natural realm. He's already in our natural realm, but he manipulated it so that we could see amazing things like the parting of the Red Sea, and when they were in Mount Sinai, the fire, the thunderings, water coming out of a rock to provide for them, bread coming out of heaven to provide for them, the earth opening up and swallowing up rebellious people in response to their sin. They saw so many things, those people. And these experiences were passed down through the generations. This is the God that they have in their mind, along with there being tons of prophecies from the prophets about their situation, their condition, how they followed along and obeyed God and how they disobeyed God and the fruit of that. Okay. And so now they're in a situation where they're being oppressed by the Romans and dominated by the Romans. They're waiting for their Messiah to come to deliver them. In come Jesus doing what no other man, no other prophet has done before him. Things that would make it seem that he could only be the Messiah based on all the prophecies that they had had about the Messiah. So I think one thing we have to understand is that Jesus didn't just step on the scene doing random stuff. He didn't just step on the scene doing magic tricks. If you read this thing from cover to cover, because I'm doing this study before the cross, okay? But several times before this, I've done Bible in a year and read this cover to cover. And the last time I did Bible in a year, I did it with a fine-tooth comb. That's how I came to the place this time where I'm like, okay, I've done Bible in a year. I could continue to do Bible in a year and probably will continue to do Bible in a year. But when I got to the Gospels, I was like, man, there's a lot here. I need to comb through this, not with a fine tooth comb, but with a fine tooth comb and really take my time. I really want to take my time here. I want to pay attention to what Jesus is saying, because there's a lot here that I feel like there's more, and I just want to sit with it. Okay. And so he didn't just come and start doing random stuff that he thought would be amazing to these people. The things that he did were in direct alignment to the things that it was prophesied that they could expect from their Messiah, that they would expect from God. Okay. Except he was going against all the religious systems that they had come to set up to express their devotion to this Father God. And he didn't behave like them. He didn't fall in line with the structure that they had built on top of the structure that God had given them about who he was and how they should relate to him. And to make matters worse, he kept presenting himself as being one with the Father and suggesting that there could be no separation between him and the Father, this almighty God, this almighty creator that kept offending their assumptions about God. And so make no mistake that the ultimate crucifixion that happens, they crucified him because he kept promoting this union. He kept saying, I'm not doing this. The Father's doing this through me because the Father and I are one. He's my Father. I'm his son. I'm the Messiah. He kept saying it. And he kept saying it in no uncertain terms. Okay. And the signs that he did were signs that no one else before him could claim. And in this passage, he goes so far as to say, they can't mistake these signs. They're not mistaking these signs. This is not a denial that comes from a place of ignorance. This is a denial that comes from a place of rejection. And because they've rejected me, they can't be saved because I can't be separated from my Father. There's no separation between me and my Father. And in the last live, we talk about how Jesus said, if you have seen me, you have seen my Father. My Father is a spirit. Here I am in the flesh. If you have seen me, you have seen my Father. My Father and I are one. I am in my Father. My Father is in me. You can't take me out of my Father. Okay? And then he goes on to make this claim in this passage that they hate me. They have hated me, meaning they have rejected what I'm saying, what I'm offering, what I've come to bring. They've hated it. They've hated me. Okay? And then he suggests, Make no mistake, if you hate me, you hate my Father. You can't separate the two. And I wanted to come on here and do this live because I was meditating on the fact that that's exactly what we try to do. Because these people were claiming, we do reject you, Jesus. We reject you, but we still serve God. We can reject you and everything that you're saying, but we still are loyal to God. They make it as though there's a way we can separate the Father from the Son. That there's a way you can accept God and still please God, but reject Jesus. And Jesus himself is saying plainly that you can't reject Jesus, you can't reject me and reject the Father. And the way he explains it to them is, let me explain to you what's really going on here. If you've chosen to follow me, if you've chosen to be my disciple, it's the kind of situation where what I really am to you, let's make an analogy. Think of me as a vine. Think of me as a vine. I'm a vine. And think of my Father as being the person that tends the vine. Think of yourself as branches. Now, if you know anything about plants, you know that a branch shoots off of a main, structure, the main structure of a plant. And that main structure has all kinds of roots that go into the ground. And these roots draw all kinds of nutrients into the plant and water into the plant so that the plant can thrive and get the fuel that it needs to live. Okay? And if you know anything about plants, you know that if you break a branch off of a vine and just leave it there, that branch cannot survive because it doesn't have anything in and of itself to draw nutrients or the things that it needs to live. Okay, so Jesus is saying this is a situation. If you're choosing to be my disciple. If you're choosing to follow me, if you're choosing me, you're choosing to serve me. This is what the situation is. I'm like your source for everything that you need to live. Okay, and my Father. Okay, and let me continue. I am your source for everything you need to live. Okay, your purpose in me, your purpose for being attached to me is to bear fruit. And this kind of fruit glorifies my Father who tends this situation, this vine. Okay? And my Father is there watching, and he's involved in this situation so that he's looking at you as a branch and he's pruning you. So if you know anything about plants, you understand that, a plant will do better in its production of fruit if you prune it. And so I sat there and I started to meditate because I have a lot of plants. I love plants. Okay. So I sat there and I started to meditate. Okay, when I'm pruning a plant, what are some of the things that I do? Okay. When I'm pruning a plant, I consider the leaves of the plant. And if there are any leaves that look like they're damaged, drying up, disease, if there's any kind of parasite on the leaves or anything like that, I look at the leaf, and what I'm looking for is I'm looking for a leaf that's green, mostly green. If there's any kind of rip in the leaf, I'm looking to see if the rip healed up or sealed up. If the rip healed up or sealed up and the rest of the leaf relatively looks green and healthy, then I might let that leaf stay right where it is. But if the rip is too much and it looks like the leaf is drying up and crusting up, dying off, then I'll pull the leaf off of the plant, or I'll cut the leaf off of the plant. And if a leaf is completely dead, I'll just completely remove it. The reason I do this is because the plant only has so much energy. and it's going to give off energy to anything that has any bit of life in it. And a leaf that's on its way out is getting energy that the plant really could be using to promote even more production from fully healthy leaves. And so if the plant has plenty of leaves and I see a leaf that's unhealthy, I'll get rid of it. I'll also get rid of the dead plants, because the dead leaves and the dead things that are falling off of the tree, because those dead leaves and stuff, they're the perfect environment for parasites, and for moisture to be retained, and for mold to build up, and all kinds of things that I don't want to kind of damage this plant and hinder the production of the fruit, because that's what I'm after. I'm after whatever the fruit gives off when it's in its most healthiest state. That's what I'm after. Maybe it's fruit, maybe it's flowers, whatever it is. I'm doing all of that to take care of this plant. And as I'm pruning the plant, if I see branches growing in the wrong direction that's going to hinder other branches, maybe those branches are not dead, but I see that they're going to be a problem in the future, so maybe I'll take these branches away. And if the plant needs support, I'll put a stake in it and tie it up to something to help shore it up and support it, so that the weight of it doesn't cause it to break off. And maybe the plant might be growing in the direction that I don't want it to be, and maybe I'll shore it up or tie it up or do something to reposition it so that it's getting the light that it wants. It's not in the way of somebody walking past it and breaking something off because of the force of them bumping into the plant. I do all of that when I'm pruning a plant and I'm tending the plant. And Jesus is painting the picture that together with his Father, they're working together. Jesus is the vine. He's the system through which all the nutrients are getting sucked into you. And then the Father's doing this pruning work. And together, me being the branch, I'm able to bear fruit. And he points out, if you go off on your own to do the wrong thing and separate yourself from me, there's no life, there's no opportunity for you to continue to live, because life is in me. And so if you do that, you're going to wither, you're going to dry up. And when I saw the word wither, I immediately thought about, a lot of times we hear people who've given their lives to Jesus saying stuff like, I'm in a dry season. I'm going through a dry season. I feel so dry. I'm so dry. And it really, that withered branch took my mind right there, and it made me realize being dry and being in a dry season, that's not biblical. And it's like people talk about being dry and walking through a dry season like it's a natural thing that happens to believers. There'll be seasons when you feel good, and then there'll be seasons because of the circumstances that are going on in your life that you'll feel dry. That's not what Jesus said. If you read the story of the woman at the issue of the woman at the well, I'm combining two stories together: the woman with the issue of blood and the woman at the well as that came out of my mouth. But if you read the story about the woman at the well, what Jesus said to her would happen if she comes into relationship with him is that, she would never be dry. She would never be thirsty. And that out of her belly would run rivers of living water, that she would always be full of life, that she would always be sustained. Okay. But the key is to stay connected to the vine. So I came to realize, wow, because I've experienced that. I've experienced that dryness. Okay. But if I really sit and consider what was going on and what was happening in my life and what happened when I was feeling dry like that, I would have to admit that I became disconnected to Jesus. I became disconnected to the vine. I became disconnected in the sense that, either he gave me some kind of direction, I didn't like it, I didn't understand it, I refused to incline myself to it, and I turned my heart towards something else. Disconnected. or I got caught up in everything that was happening, everything that I had to put my hands to, and told myself I didn't have time. I didn't have time to spend with the Lord. And what's ironic, what's ironic about that is I cannot think of a single time in my life, in my busiest seasons, where I ever said to myself, I don't have time to watch my show. I don't have time to watch this movie. My life is so busy. I just don't have time to listen to this podcast. I just don't have time to listen to my music. I just don't have time to ever have no time. I never have time to read the book that I want to read. I never have time. You know what I'm saying? To sit here and stuff my face with these comfort foods that I want to eat right now. I just don't have time. It seems to me that I always seem to find a way to make time for the stuff that I really want to do, the stuff that I think bring me comfort and relief. I find some kind of time every day to approach that. But yet there have 100% been times in my life where I felt like I just don't have time to be connected to the Lord, to turn my focus on Him. I felt that way, and I can hear myself saying these things, okay? And there's no condemnation. I'm not saying this to condemn anybody, because as I've said, I've been there, okay? But Jesus has laid it out for us so that we can understand what's really going on. It's not that there's a dry season that God brings into your life to teach you something and to help you to grow. And you need to walk through these dry seasons in order to grow. Because remember, He was trying to take them real quick through the wilderness into their promised land, but they couldn't believe Him. They couldn't trust Him enough to take it. And so that's why they wandered back in the wilderness and were going in circles for 40 years. So that story really reinforces what Jesus is saying here. The wilderness experience is happening not because you were obedient. I'm talking about the dry, kind of struggling type of wilderness experience, okay? Now, Jesus had a wilderness experience that was more of kind of like a preparation, but it only lasted for 40 days. And He was fasting when God drew Him in there, and then the devil threw everything but the kitchen sink at Him, and He stood on the word and defeated the devil and walked out of that. And then never again did He go back into the wilderness. And there are some of us that we regularly stroll through the wilderness, and some of us are just squatting there. We're squatting there for 40 years. Just remember, those people that were squatting there for 40 years, they weren't squatting there for 40 years to go into the promised land. The original ones that rebelled. I'm not talking about their children that God said, I'm going to bring your children in. I'm talking about the original ones that rebelled. They squatted there and they died. So the end result of being in the wilderness is death. So we don't want that. I mean, I feel like people celebrate that, and people it just rolls off their tongue. Well, I'm going through a wilderness experience. I hope you're talking about the one where the devil is trying to tempt you and you're using the word. Or you're talking about the one where John the Baptist came out of the wilderness baptizing and declaring, preparing the way for the Lord. I hope these are the kind of wilderness experiences you're talking about, and not, I can't hear His voice. He hasn't spoken to me in years. He hasn't spoken to you in years. That's not what Jesus promises. Something is wrong. Something is off. God talks to me so much. It's almost like, slow down, Lord. He's eager to talk to you. He wants to talk to you. He wants to lead you. He wants to direct you. But do you even understand His language? And do you know how to hear His voice? And have you obeyed what He told you to do the last time? He's still waiting for you to do it. Okay, so that dryness is a place of disconnect. You disconnected somewhere, somehow. You're not yoked up to the vine. Okay, you're not yoked up to the vine. You're not sucking down this word. When you're sucking down this word, there is no dryness. You're gonna experience what I'm experiencing, where there's so much, you're being filled so much, you have to get up here on YouTube and do lives and tell people about what the Lord is giving you, because if you don't let it out, you're gonna explode. That's what it is to be connected to the vine. Okay, so and then Jesus goes on to say, without me, without this connection, you can't bear this fruit. You can't do anything. It's impossible. So he's basically saying the Father is looking for fruit from you. If I'm the vine that's giving you everything you need so that you can produce this fruit, and if the only way you can please the Father and do what he designed you to do is to bear this fruit, if you take me out of the equation, it's impossible for you to bear fruit. The only thing that can happen to you is that you're going to dry up, you're going to wither up. And what we do with branches, when we make good use of branches, that have been disconnected from the vine, they make excellent firewood. And Jesus is always doing this. I'm like, why do your parables always end like this, Jesus? Why do your stories end like this all the time when you're talking about what happens if you don't choose Jesus? What happens if you don't join hands with Jesus? What happens? It always something about being burnt up, being cast into outer darkness where there is gnashing of teeth and weeping or some fire. It's never good. He never says, yeah, well, those branches just, they go on to be used to build houses. They go on to be used to make an axe. They go on to be used to be carved, to be used to make a live edge table. They go on to be used. Like, he never says it's something good, or that there's an alternative good end for this condition of not choosing him. He's very black and white. And I was talking to my husband this weekend, and he was telling me that there's this whole God is gray movement. Have you read the Bible? Please read the Bible for yourself. Actually sit down and read the Bible for yourself and show me how God is gray. Show me where he's gray. Show me where Jesus was gray. If you don't want to, you feel like, oh, that's a hard thing to do. That's a lot of pages to read cover to cover. Okay, read the book of John. Read Matthew. Read Luke. Better yet, you want something succinct? Read Mark. Tell me how Jesus is gray. We want him to be gray because we want to be able to do what the Pharisees did. We want to be able to reject Jesus and think we can still have God. But Jesus is saying in this passage right here, and he's been saying it all along, you can't have God without me. It's not just a name. It's not enough that this thing that you've designed looks like it has similar characteristics and it feels like it includes the principles of Jesus, and that's in and of itself is good enough. There is no separation between Jesus and the Father. You can't separate him. So what it is once you take Jesus out of the equation, you no longer have the Father, because the Father encompasses Jesus. So if it were possible, at best, all you'd have is a part of him. But you can't have a part of him. You either have all of him or you have none of him. That's what Jesus is saying here. So it does matter. So if you're following some kind of religion that, I've heard people say this, well, it's the same God. They just don't honor Jesus. It's not the same. Jesus is saying it's not the same God. He's saying there is no God before there is me. And he's saying, I always, I've been with the Father from the beginning. Okay. I came to earth and fulfilled the role of walking here in the flesh. But before that, I was the Word. John chapter 1, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Okay, let me read it to y'all. Let me read it to y'all. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him, nothing was made that was made. In him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. There was a man sent from God whose name was John. This man came for a witness, to bear witness of the light, that all through him might believe. He was not that light, but was sent to bear witness of that light. That was the true light, which gives light to every man coming into the world. He was in the world, and the world was made through him, and the world did not know him. So I could read this passage like this. In the beginning was Jesus, and Jesus was with God, and Jesus was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through Jesus, and without Jesus, nothing was made that was made. In Jesus was life, and the life was the light of men. And Jesus shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not comprehend it. Jesus shines in the world, and the world does not understand him. Okay, and then John came to bear witness of Jesus. John was not Jesus, but he was sent to bear witness of Jesus. Jesus is the true light, which gives light to every man coming into the world. Jesus was in the world, and the world was made through Jesus, and the world did not know Jesus. Jesus came to his own people, and his own did not receive him. But as many as received Jesus, to them he gave the right to become children of God, to those who believed in his name, Jesus. Okay? So in case you guys are like, she's just twisting it, she's making it up. Let's go back to talking about the Word, because it said in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right? That was verse 1. Now look at John 1, chapter 14. Let's talk about him as the Word. He says, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory, the glory as of the only begotten of the Father, full of grace and truth. He's talking about Jesus. Okay? And Jesus is saying, you can't reject me. You can't reject my words. You can't reject the stuff that I taught, because he goes on to talk about, if you're accepting me, you're accepting my words. If you're accepting me, you're accepting my commandments. That's another thing. You can't say you're accepting Jesus, but you're rejecting all these things that he has said. And we see that happening right now. I'm not comfortable with that. So I'm just going to not follow that, but I'm still serving Jesus. I don't agree with that. I disagree with that. Okay. So I'm not going to keep that, but I'm still serving Jesus. Jesus said that you can't reject my word and accept me. I am my word. If you accept me, you accept my word. If you accept me, you accept my Father. There's no separation. You can't separate these things. We have to stop separating these things. You can't separate the Father from Jesus. You can't separate Jesus from his word. If you want it, you have to take it all. And he said, I've sent my spirit to help you. He's the spirit of truth. There's one truth. And he's the spirit of truth, sent to bring you into all truth. And all of these things are one. They're tied up together. The Father, Jesus, the Spirit, his word, that everything is all tied up together. These things can't be separated. Okay? And the world is a mess today because we've separated it. We think we can separate it. We think we've separated it. We think we have something. But if you've separated things out, you don't have anything. Because it's not possible for these things to be separated. So while we walk on this earth, it's possible for us to think we've been successful and that we've created the life that we want. But we're eternal beings. And once our time, our season on this earth has passed, we will face the eternal God. Because we ourselves are eternal beings. And at that point, we will understand and realize that we never had him at all. Because Jesus also said there's going to be a lot of people saying, Lord, Lord, didn't I cast devils out in your name? Didn't I do this in your name? Didn't I serve you? And he'll say, depart from me. Okay, I never knew you. I never knew you. And you never actually knew me. Because you didn't receive me. You glommed onto a piece. And I'm not a piece. I'm a whole. You either have all of me or you have none of me. That's what he's saying. That's what he's saying. And he's saying that there's only been one way to clean up the mess that you were in before I came. There's only one way out of this mess that started with Adam and Eve rebelling against me and coming into agreement with Satan. That there could be something better, that I was denying them. So they were just going to join hands with Satan and turn their authority over to him and allow him to become the ruler of this world. There's only one way out of this mess. And it's through me. Jesus said, I am the way. I am the truth. I am your only opportunity to have life. No one is getting through the Father except through me. And he gave so many examples. Another example he gave is, I'm the gate. You can't get into the sheepfold any other way but through me. I'm the gate. No Jesus, no Father. Okay, you guys, that's all I have for you this morning. I'm looking at the chat. It says love. Oh, love is the law. Good morning. Welcome. She said he or she, I can't tell by your picture if you're a he or a she, says blessings. Thank you. Thank you. You be blessed this morning. And so that's all I have for you guys this morning. Be blessed. I'm about to run up there and make sure that my kids are on track for what they need to do this morning. So I'll see you in the next live.